I got to admit, I like it when this happens. 2 hours of Jimmy Akin open forum today. I can just relax and have a good time. Oh, hi, Jimmy Akin. How are you?
Doing okay. How are you, Cy Kellett?
I am very, very well. Thank you, Jimmy Akin. I like these 2 hour things.
Me too.
When we get you to go. I mean,
I like them a lot.
Yeah. I last week, half of the radio hours were Jimmy Akin hours.
Yeah,
and it seemed like a good week.
It was fundraising too.
Yeah,
though,
that's
so
true too. I forgot about that. That's right.
Wasn't the pure unadulterated experience.
For the person out there who is just tuning in to Catholic Answers, don't know us, don't know Jimmy Akin, I will let you know. Jimmy is the senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, and the author of many, many things, including his A Daily Defense, 365 Days plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist, The Fathers Know Best, and Teaching with Authority, the newest published book. And another one coming, we are told, in September or October or something.
Yeah, September. No,
September.
It'll
definitely be
for
out
the conference. Yeah, I have to turn in the manuscript next month.
All right, good. And it's coming along well?
Yeah, I got to the halfway point today.
All right. And
I expect to turn it in within the next 2 to 4 weeks.
do you want to do any spoilers? How it ends or anything like that? Or
with
big
the
car crash or something?
No, with practical tips on how you can learn more from the Bible.
Oh, all right. That's way better than a car crash. Mm-hmm. Open Forum works this way. If you have a question about the Catholic faith, you are welcome to call. Whatever the question, and whether you are Catholic or not, you are welcome to call. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. All the way from the big things like why we believe in God and why we believe that Jesus is God, down to the smaller things like why do we use holy water? Or
I thought you were going to say things that are subject to quantum field theory, like, electrons and quarks.
The thing
protons,
is, Jimmy,
photons.
if I say you can call on that, someone will call on it, and then you'll have an answer for them.
Yeah,
that's it's not physics answers.
Well,
it's Catholic answers.
Are you saying that physics is not part of the universe God designed?
No, I wasn't trying to go there. I was just saying.
Where did it come from then?
The universe?
The physics that are in the universe.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't come from God.
No, God invented physics.
Yeah.
Right? It was his idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's great with the follow through on ideas. He gets them and he follows through on them.
Yeah.
So,
except for the infinite ones, he doesn't, so far as we know.
Because
he has an unlimited number of ideas, and
really?
As far as we know, he's only made a finite number of things.
Okay. And he knows everything I've ever thought in my life.
And everything you ever could possibly think but won't.
Which is all right. So he knows all the TV shows I've missed that I should have watched, all the ones I've watched that I should have missed.
Yeah,
all that. God is amazing. So if you have a question about God and your television habits, you are welcome to call. If you have a question of a more generally philosophical or religious nature, you're also welcome to call with that question. 888-318-7884. Look at the lines filling up, Jimmy. Shall we go?
Yeah.
All right, we go straight to calls. Then Brian, watching on Facebook Live, you are up first. Your question for Jimmy Akin, Brian.
Pleasure to be with you guys today. I picked up the Fathers Know Best book, Jimmy, and I'm loving it.
Awesome.
My question is, why were women so heavily portrayed at being near the crucifixion, and where were the other apostles during the crucifixion?
Well, we don't know for 100%. You'll hear a lot of people say that except for John, the apostles were not there. And that's based on the fact that after Jesus, or that when Jesus was arrested, they all fled. They ran off into the night. And then even after the crucifixion, even after the resurrection, they were still kind of in hiding to some extent. And so you'll hear a lot of people just assume that they weren't at the crucifixion, and that the only one that was John, because we're told that the beloved disciple, who may not be the Apostle John, it may be a different John, but we're told in John chapter 19 that he was there at the foot of the cross, and so people will make an exception for him. But the problem is that's really a lot of inference, and it is not clear at all that that is the case. In fact, if you look in Luke's gospel, Luke says that the people who knew Jesus were all there, and that would suggest that the apostles were there. They were watching this event. which would then suggest there's a different reason why the women are so prominent. It's not because the women were the only ones there. It's because of something else. And what you find, if you look at all four of the Gospels, is they all establish a chain of custody. They have the women at the cross to witness Jesus' death. They have the women at the burial when he's buried. And then they have the women be the first ones to find the empty tomb because they're going there to anoint the body. And so they're establishing what's called the provenance of the empty tomb. Or, they saw that Jesus died, they saw that he was buried, and then they saw the empty tomb. So they're establishing a chain of custody for this.
Oh, yeah.
And it's undergirding the apologetic argument you can make for the resurrection. And that seems to be a conscious intention on part of all four of the evangelists. And so that would suggest that the reason the women are so prominent at the crucifixion is not because they were the only ones there, but because they're the ones who were going to discover the empty tomb. And so the evangelists want to make sure that we know that they knew where the tomb was, and they knew Jesus had been buried and that he had died.
I've never, ever heard that. Brian, thanks so much for that very, very, very interesting question, provoking that very interesting answer. 888-318-7884, the number. Next up is Katie in Massachusetts. Your question, Katie, for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, thank you. My question is a DNC considered an abortion if they cannot detect a heartbeat?
Yes.
And I'm asking this because I've had many people share stories about how they were bleeding, they were having a miscarriage, they could find no heartbeat, but the hospital would not do a DNC because it was considered an abortion.
Okay. Well, a DNC, if there's a living baby in the womb, even if there's no detectable heartbeat, would count as an abortion because you have a living child in there. And for people who don't know, DNC is obstetric slang for dilation and curettage. It's where the opening to the womb is dilated, and then you use a medical implement called a curette to go into the womb and remove the contents. I'm putting it kind of delicately for obvious reasons. But when a DNC occurs, it can be used after, for example, a miscarriage, in which case it's just it's a way of removing material from the womb that needs to come out.
Yep.
But it is also used as a method of abortion, and that's the case whenever there is a living child in there, and it ends up killing the child because the action of the curette will do that if the child is still alive. And so it would be an abortion, and an abortion is the termination of a pregnancy where you have a living child who, one way or another, either dies in the womb or is taken out of the womb forcibly with the intent to have it die. And so it would be an abortion. The heartbeat is really irrelevant to the question of is there an abortion or not, strictly speaking, because you don't have to have a heartbeat to be alive. You could be a one-celled human being. You could be at the zygote stage, and you would be alive, and you don't have a heart yet.
Right.
You are still living and growing as an unborn child for several weeks before your heart develops and starts beating. And so you don't have to have a heart beat to be a human being. In fact, people who have lost their hearts, they grew up and then they had a heart problem and then they get put on a machine that causes blood to flow through their body. Well, they don't have a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. In fact, they may just have a continuous stream flowing through their body, depending on how the blood pump works. There may not be a detectable beat. If you feel their artery in their wrist to find a pulse, you're not going to find a pulse because the blood's just evenly flowing.
Oh, okay.
And so having a heartbeat or even a heart is not essential to being a human being. What is being alive, being a living human organism. And as long as you have a living human organism in the womb, then a DNC or any other procedure that would bring about the death of that organism is an abortion. Now, I suspect one of the reasons that this may come up is because DNCs are used legitimately to clean the womb when there has been a miscarriage, what's called a natural abortion rather than an artificial abortion. And that's something that a lot of people, because today the word abortion is so associated with deliberately doing it, people have kind of forgotten that historically any miscarriage was also called an abortion. It just wasn't a deliberate one.
Yep. Okay.
So if a natural abortion or a miscarriage occurs, then the womb may need to be cleaned out, and dilation and curettage is a legitimate procedure to accomplish that. A test that will be used for has a miscarriage occurred, if the child has not come out, would be, can we find a heartbeat? And that's one where I could see this question being asked. It's like, okay, we know there's a child in there, we cannot find the heartbeat. Is it okay to do a D&C?
Yeah.
Well, if the child is dead and known to be dead, then you could do the D&C. It wouldn't count as an abortion in that sense. But if the child is alive or may still be alive, you just can't find the heartbeat because it's too faint, then it would be an abortion, or should be considered one. You should err on the side of safety if the child may still be alive.
Right. First, do no harm.
Yeah.
Katie,
That's from the Hippocratic Oath.
Thanks very much, Katie. I really appreciate that. I hope that was helpful to you. We have to take a quick break. I will remind the listener that the store-wide spring sale on for 2 more weeks minus 1 day, and you can get everything at shop.catholic.com at 15% off if you just include the promo code SPRING19. Use that promo code SPRING19 at shop.catholic.com and get 15% off for 13 more days.
Catholic Answers Live with Jimmy Akin is coming right back.
Catholic Answers Live is proudly supported by CatholicChemistry.com, a new dating site for Catholics who want to do dating right and believe relationships start with Catholic chemistry. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicChemistry.com for their generous support on the web at CatholicChemistry.com.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Catherine Zeltner.
There are so many misconceptions when it comes to abortion and assisted suicide. It's really confusing, and I think for a lot of people, they don't know how to talk about these things. EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, we help to change that. We help to really untangle these web of lies. Listeners can expect to become informed and then grow more confident so they can then discuss and dialogue these issues, and together we can really impact culture in that way.
EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, Sunday morning at 10 a.m. on EWTN Radio.
Open Forum, Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and on the line is our friend Fabio in Canada, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app, which I'm so happy to hear works with Canadian internet. Fabio, your question for Jimmy.
Work all over the world with the internet.
So,
love that.
I have 2 questions, but
Okay, real quick, what are they?
So the first one is on Hebrews chapter 2. Verse 17, where it says, therefore he had to become like his brethren in every way. So Seventh-day Adventists take that to mean that he was made with sin just like us, because made in every way, right? So that's basically their argument, that our Lord was a sinner in that way.
Okay, well, that's going to be a problem, because there are other things in Scripture that say that Jesus was not a sinner, and in fact they'll say he was like us in all ways except sin. So sin is the key exception. And it's Hebrews, in fact, 4:15. That says this. It'll say, we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted or tested, you could translate it the same way from Greek, in every way just as we are, yet without sin. So he did not sin. Now, sometimes you'll have people, and it's been a while since I've reviewed the details of Seventh-day Adventist thought on this, but they'll say things, some people will say things like, well, even though he didn't have actual personal sin, that there was some sense in which he could have been considered a sinner. And they'll say similar things about, and there are similar things about the Virgin Mary in the history of theology, where people will say, well, she didn't have actual personal sin, but she had what's sometimes called the fomes of sin, or the kind of the roots, the seeds that never actually blossomed.
Okay.
And so, or the kind of like the potential to sin.
Okay.
And would be a sinner in that way. Those are both very problematic because those things are inconsistent with the state of elevated grace that that the Virgin Mary was in, and the fact that Jesus is the infinite, all-holy Son of God. So Jesus is one person. Something like a mere human nature, is not capable of sin. Only persons are capable of sin. And Jesus is only one person. So as long as Jesus is one person, and as long as that one person is divine and thus all good, Jesus does not have the possibility of sinning. The only way to introduce sin into the picture would be to say Jesus wasn't really one person. He would have had to be two people, a divine person who couldn't sin and a human person who could. In that case, you don't have Jesus anymore. You've got two different people. And so this is a view that is not going to be supported either by other passages of Scripture like Hebrews 4:15, which is the same book that they're basing this argument on.
Right.
And it's not going to be supported by the logic of the situation, knowing who Jesus is and the fact he's one person.
Fabio, you said you had another question. Can you give it to Jimmy real quick, please?
Yeah. I'm wondering if Old Testament saints, do they have to be baptized to go to heaven?
No. Baptism is an ordinance sacrament that was given to us in our age, but it was not required of people before our age, and so the Old Testament saints did not have to be baptized before going to heaven.
Fabio, thank you very, very much for your questions. I hope that was helpful to you. We go now to Lisa in Ontario, Canada, watching on YouTube Live. Lisa, I'm very happy YouTube works in Canada. Your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Cy and Jimmy. My husband and I want to thank you both so much. We watch you guys every night. Well, not both of you every night, but we watch this channel every night, and you guys have brought us back to the Catholic faith. So we want
praise
to
God,
thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And my question is, who led the church after Peter?
Well, according to the succession lists that we have from the 2nd century, it was a man named Linus. The early pope lists start with Peter as the first pope, and then after he passed from the scene, the office of the Bishop of Rome was inherited by a man named Linus, and then it was inherited by a man named Anacletus, who is also sometimes called Cletus for short, and then it was inherited by a man named Clement. Now, there are a few later sources that kind of forget about Linus and Anacletus and just depict Clement as if he's the next pope, but those sources are not the early ones. The early ones really say it went Peter, Linus, Anacletus, and Clement.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Sure
Thank
thing.
you. God bless you guys.
And you
You
too,
too.
Lisa. Thank you for your kind words. It is open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and Jonathan is on the line from Lincoln, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Jonathan, your question for Jimmy.
Hey, everyone. Fabio's question earlier actually reminded me of a great question that I had, so I wanted to ask that question of Jimmy if I could.
What's
All
that?
So my understanding is that the Eastern Orthodox don't ascribe to a view of original sin that Catholics would agree with. And so, of course, they don't hold to the Immaculate Conception. Part of all of that, I guess the result, is that even though they would say that Mary had no personal sin, that they believe she was born with a nature just like any one of us alive today, would be born with, and that's something that's really important, because if Jesus didn't have a nature just like ours, then he wouldn't be a human like us, kind of getting what Fabio was saying in Hebrews, but he would also have redeemed a nature different than the one that we had. Now, they agree also that Jesus never sinned. I would agree with that as well. But I wanted to know your thoughts about that.
Well, I would reiterate a lot of what I said previously. Jesus is a single person, and a non-person cannot sin. Only persons cannot sin. So if Jesus had the ability to sin, then he could not be a divine person, because by definition, divine persons have the divine nature and therefore are all holy and incapable of sin. God cannot sin. So the fact that Jesus is a single divine person means that it is totally impossible for him to sin. The only way to avoid that conclusion would be to say he's not really one person, he's two persons, and that's heretical. That's a heresy known as Nestorianism. In terms of what you said about Eastern Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox, you're going to get different expressions of these ideas from different members of the Eastern Orthodox communion. They haven't followed the same path in doctrinal development that we have. They recognize the same basic things. So they'll say, for example, Mary never sinned. But the precise way that relates to her conception is an area that hasn't been officially developed in the teaching of Eastern Orthodoxy, magisterially speaking. And so you're going to have different opinions on it from different Orthodox theologians. And I wouldn't say that they don't believe in the Immaculate Conception or anything so extreme. Some of them will. Some of them will use that very expression. Others will disagree. So I don't want to paint with a broad brush, just like I don't like saying the Protestant position on almost anything, because there's almost never one Protestant position on something. I also don't want to characterize the Eastern Orthodox as if there's just a monolithic position on these questions, either about Jesus or Mary, with respect to the Eastern Orthodox. There may be ideas that are more or less common in Eastern Orthodox circles, but there's not a single monolithic position on them. Having said that, to loop back to kind of the hinge connecting the two issues, it's the issue of nature and the sameness of our nature. Well, we're going to have the same nature when we're in heaven that we have now. We're not going to cease to be human beings. We're still going to have a human nature, but we're not going to be sinning. And that means human nature is not intrinsically sinful. It's not. It's just not. And therefore, Jesus could inherit or have at his conception an unfallen human nature, as could Mary, and Jesus could then redeem that unfallen human nature. It doesn't require there to be sin in human nature or even the potential for sin, because one day we're not going to have that potential. We'll still have free will. We'll be able to choose among different good things, but we're not going to be able to choose any bad things. So sinfulness and human nature are just two separate things. In terms of articulating that, I guess that's the fundamental thing I would want to point out. If you want a comparison, you might think about software. Let's suppose you have the world's greatest software designer, and he writes an operating system for your computer, and you install it, and it behaves perfectly. And then you introduce a bug into it,
yeah, I see it. Yep.
or a virus or something like that, and it stops behaving properly. And all of the copies you make of that operating system that have the virus or the bug don't behave fully properly. But that doesn't mean that this operating system intrinsically has software damage. When it was originally written, it didn't. And you can patch it to get rid of the bug or get rid of the virus. And that's essentially what fallenness is like in human beings. Human nature is not intrinsically sinful, it's extrinsically sinful because of the fall. And consequently, Jesus did not need to be sinful or to have the potential to sin in order to be able to redeem humans.
Jonathan from Lincoln, Nebraska, thank you so much for that. I hope that that was helpful to you. Jimmy Akin is our guest this hour, and I didn't keep close track, but I don't think we've had any calls from non-Catholics, so I will remind you again that we love to take calls from non-Catholics, non-Christians. Anybody is welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. We have, well, you know what? I'm gonna wait on that. Don't forget, 15% off right now on everything at shop.catholic.com. You can get that 15% off by entering the promo code SPRING19. Spring19 gets 15% off at shop.catholic.com.
Looking for an on-fire Catholic speaker for your event? Catholic Answers speakers will inform and inspire your audience to grow in their Catholic faith. For more information on booking a Catholic Answers speaker, visit CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com today.
In his new audio presentation, The Very First Fathers, apologist Jimmy Akin takes you on a tour of the earliest Christian writings outside the New Testament. From the most famous figures and most notable works to those lesser known but no less important, this pivotal time in the development of the early church is revealed in fascinating detail. Jimmy shows how, even in the first century after the resurrection, it was necessary to defend and explain truths that are still under attack today, such as the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and the perpetual virginity of Mary. The Very First Fathers is a compelling look at the dawn of the Christian age and edifying listening for anyone who wants to understand and defend the full truth of Catholicism. Order your copy of The Very First Fathers today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Love and beauty. As a little girl, Dawn Eden Goldstein knew that she wanted those things, that in them somehow she would find God. Over the years as a rock journalist, she moved among some of popular music's best-known artists, straining to capture that transcendent love and beauty in every note and lyric. In Sunday Will Never Be the Same, Dawn recounts her spiritual journey in beautifully wrought detail, mixing powerful accounts of trauma, healing, and epiphany with funny anecdotes from inside the music scene. It is the rare conversion story that delights as it inspires, amuses as it edifies, and ultimately lays before the reader a lived testimony to the transforming grace of Christ. Order your copy of Sunday Will Never Be the Same by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum with Jimmy Akin today. Our number, 888-318-7884. The lines fill up pretty quickly when Jimmy's here, so you might have to give it a couple tries before you get in. But look at that, I see a line open right now. So if you want to dial now, 888-318-7884, you are welcome to call. We go now to Diane in San Antonio, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Hello, Diane.
Hi.
You got a question for Jimmy?
Yes, I do. My question is, my son and I were discussing this the other day, where God knew at the very beginning, because God knows everything, and then the angels fought, and God created hell. Since God knew that there was going to be angels that were fighting, then he deliberately created hell. So now hell and heaven are equal, is the stance that my son is taking. In spite of what I tried, they had a choice, as I understand these angels did. Is that correct? And
well, I'm not sure exactly how you and your son may be understanding some aspects of this. God did know that angels would fall, but the problem, there are several problems here. The first one is God is outside of time, and consequently he sees all of history all at once. So it's not like God existed at a moment in time before he created angels. There may or may not have been time before angels were created, but the same moment that God exists in outside of time in the eternal now is the moment from which he sees all of history playing out all at once, and that includes the fall of the angels. So it's not like we have, I guess I can say more about this, but in principle, there are some complications when we think about this because God really isn't inside of time. We sometimes picture it as if he simply existed before everything else, but in reality, he exists alongside of it outside of time in the eternal now, and that has a bearing on some of these questions. But God, from his vantage point in the eternal now, does see the fall of angels, and consequently, he took steps to deal with them, to provide justice for them, and also Scripture depicts him as having created places where they could be detained, kind of like a prison, so that they wouldn't be able to hurt other people. Not all of them are in prison at the moment, but it does at least talk as if there's some kind of detainment facility or procedure for them. And so God did take steps to deal with them, and those steps, whatever they may be, are certainly real, but that doesn't mean heaven and hell are equal any more than here in the world it means that prison and all the rest of the world that's not in prison are equal. And so consequently, I'm not entirely sure what your son might mean by proposing that heaven and hell are equal. They're equal in the sense that they're both real, but that doesn't mean they're equal in other senses, like hell is just as good as heaven. Obviously, it's not, just like prison is not just as good as liberty. It doesn't mean that as many people are in hell as are in heaven, any more than it means that as many people are in prison who are at liberty. It doesn't mean a whole bunch of other things. So there are all kinds of inequalities between heaven and hell as well. They are equally real, but they're unequal in many other senses.
Okay, Diane?
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much for the call. Let us go now to Cody in California watching on YouTube Live. Cody, you got a question for Jimmy? Cody, do I have you there?
Yeah, yes, I do. I just wanted to say I'm discerning becoming Catholic, so not Catholic yet, but on the way there for sure.
Awesome. How can we help?
But yeah, my question is, I don't know how familiar you are with the book of Joel, but it talks a lot about the grain offering and the new wine or the drink offering and then the oil. And I was wondering if, that refers to the Eucharist, the bread and the wine.
Not in the literal sense. We always have to start when we interpret Scripture by starting with the literal sense before we go to other senses of the text. And what the literal sense is it's whatever the author, the human author, intended to communicate to his audience under divine inspiration. And so you look, for example, in Joel chapter 1, and Joel is talking about an agricultural crisis that has occurred in Israel. And he talks about how there's been an invasion of locusts that have eaten up lots of plants. And it's really harmed people's ability to make a livelihood because at the time, everyone almost was a farmer. That's how people survived, by being farmers. And very few people were something other than a farmer. And so when you have a massive locust plague, it really causes a big disruption. Also, there's like a drought, and that's also harmed the agriculture. And so in Joel chapter 1, you have this lamentation of this agricultural disaster that has happened. And in that context, Joel does, for example, talk about grain offerings and drink offerings. In Joel 9, he says, grain offerings and drink offerings are cut off from the house of the Lord. The priests are in mourning, those who minister before the Lord. The fields are ruined, the ground is dried up, the grain is destroyed, the new wine is dried up, the olive oil fails. And so because of the drought and the locust, all the crops are failing, including the grain crop, the grape crop that you use to make the wine, and the olive crop that you use to make the oil. And so that's what's happening on the literal sense of the text. Joel is saying this agricultural disaster has happened, the crops are failing, and as a result of the crops failing, they're not being presented at the temple. Because if you don't have grain, you can't present a grain offering at the temple. And if you don't have wine, you can't present a drink offering at the temple, and so forth. So that's what he's saying literally when he talks about this. And this is a cause, obviously, of great distress for all of the people, including the priests of the temple. Now, having said that, is there a potential connection that we could see in this to the Eucharist that could be somewhere in the spiritual sense of the text, if we move beyond the literal sense of the text? And yeah, sure there is. One of the things you find out when you study the Old Testament sacrificial economy is that they had a variety of different types of offerings that were presented at the temple. They included grain offerings, they included drink offerings, and that was simply because people ate grain and drank wine. And those were the two most fundamental elements of their diet, bread from grain and wine from grapes. Those were the two main things that they would have to eat and drink. And so it was natural for them, in presenting their agricultural wealth to God as a thank you for having enabled them to grow it, it was natural for them to present grain offerings and drink offerings at the temple. Well, then in the New Testament, when Jesus establishes the Eucharist, he also has a solid component that we eat, the host, the bread that is consecrated to become his body, and also a liquid element that we drink, the precious blood that has been transformed from wine into his blood. And so he picks up on this solid liquid sacrificial elements idea from the Old Testament and applies it in his new sacrifice of the Eucharist, which of course is tied to the offering of his body and blood on the cross. It represents that sacrifice to God. And so there is a connection between the solid and liquid sacrifices of the Old Testament and the Eucharist, and you could see that reflected in Joel, but it's not on the literal level what Joel is talking about. Any application to the Eucharist would be part of the spiritual sense of the text in Joel rather than the literal sense of the text.
Cody, I do hope that that is helpful. Thank you very much for the call. It is open forum today. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and the number is 888-31-TRUTH. Right now, we've got a free ebook we'd love to give you. May is Mary's month, and we've got a book called Queen of Heaven, Ever Virgin, Full of Grace. This ebook includes a great chapter by Jimmy on defending the Immaculate Conception. You're going to want to read it, and I have to say, this is about the best price we ever offer. Free! Just go to shop.catholic.com and click on the Queen of Heaven banner, and you can download your free copy of Queen of Heaven, Ever Virgin, Full of Grace.
Call and ask Jimmy your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
Fallen away Catholic years and years ago, doing my own thing, and my mom and dad never gave up on me, and I know it was the Holy Rosary, and they kept after me. Philip, pray your rosary, and eventually I did. I'm a member of the Knights of the Immaculata, Maximilian Kolbe's group. I'm with the Legion of Mary, and I haven't stopped leading the rosary in nursing homes, thanks be to God.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest, and on the line from Houston, Texas, watching, I got that right. On the line from Houston, Texas, watching on YouTube Live is, in fact, our next caller, Casey. Casey, are you there with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Your question for Jimmy.
Okay, yeah. My question is in regards to Matthew 16:19. And I want to ask you to make two comments on two particular things. The first one is the kingdom of heaven. You know, I've been reading some commentaries, and it says that it doesn't refer to like a physical or like the spiritual kingdom of God, but it refers to God's sovereignty. And the second thing is some type of Greek syntax within the binding and loosening, which are like future tense, which is, you know, they literally translate as what you bind on earth will already have been, which would mean that he's not initiating new direction, but like guiding it.
Yeah.
So I just ask that you, comment on these things. If you need time to address both, address one today, and I'll ask another one.
No, that's
some other
fine.
Time.
I can do both of them. So the in regard to the first one, you will sometimes hear people say that the kingdom of God is not to be understood, or the kingdom of heaven, same thing. Heaven is a substitute word that got used for God because when because Jewish people wanted to treat references to God very delicately, and they wanted to, in keeping with don't profane his name, one of the 10 commandments, they got a little, some would say, overly cautious about saying the word God. And so in Jewish circles, it was often to use substitutes for the word God, and one of those was heaven. And since Matthew is writing to a Jewish audience, he'll say the kingdom of heaven, whereas the other evangelists, writing more for a Gentile audience, will just say the kingdom of God. And so in Matthew 16:19, now this is the passage where Jesus has just told Peter, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." And then he goes on to say, this is verse 19, "I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be loosed in heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." And so the kingdom of heaven is the kingdom of God. It's the same thing. It's not to be equated with a physical kingdom here on earth. Exactly how it's to be understood can be understood in different ways. It can be understood just as God's sovereignty over the whole universe. It can be understood in a more particular way as the Christian church. It can be understood as the realm of heaven. It could be understood as all of God's actions in the world. It can be understood a bunch of different ways. So I would, while I think it's fair to say that certainly in this passage it doesn't mean a literal national kingdom here on earth like Israel. That's not how it's being used in this passage. One wants to be a little careful about being definite about how it is or isn't being used beyond that, because it's capable of having multiple different meanings, and we can't just assume which one is in play here. But because Jesus is immediately talking about his church, it at least closely ties the reality of the kingdom to Jesus' church in this passage. In terms of the binding and loosing, well, we know what this meant from several sources. This was a rabbinical term for permitting and forbidding. In other words, creating rules or abolishing rules for a community. And we know that, for example, because Josephus, the Jewish historian of the first century, uses the term in that sense and talks about how during the time of, I believe it was Queen Alexandra, the Pharisees had the power of binding and loosing. They could, through their influence at the royal court, they could effectively make or abolish laws in Israel. And Jesus is now giving that authority to Peter. You also compare this to the parallel passage in Matthew 18, and there Jesus is applying the principle of binding and loosing in the context of church discipline. So he says, if someone sins against you, try to deal with it privately. If you can't, take witnesses. If he doesn't listen to them, take him to the church. And if he won't listen to the church, treat him like a Gentile or a tax collector. In other words, treat him like an outsider, excommunicate him. And in that context, Jesus says, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven, thus indicating that heaven is going to back up the church's decisions about who to excommunicate. Now, in terms of the verb tense, which is the other thing that Austin was asked, or that Casey was asking about, it's true that in Greek, this is in the future perfect tense. And the future perfect is a tense that depicts something as already having happened because it's perfect, that are already completed, a completed action. That's the perfect part of this. But it also depicts it as, in some sense, future. That's the future part of it. And it's somewhat dicey to translate it into English in a way that makes sense to the English-speaking ear. You can translate it legitimately as whatever you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will have been loosed in heaven. But that doesn't answer all of the questions you need to ask about this passage. It doesn't imply that heaven is not ratifying these decisions. For example, you have to ask the question, well, when will this have been ratified in heaven? The fact that it's future can suggest it will have been ratified in the future, like on Judgment Day. So the idea would be the laws that Peter makes and the discipline that the church enforces on people will have been ratified by God on Judgment Day. So when you get to Judgment Day, God's going to have ratified that. Or it could be seen as emphasizing that God from all eternity past has already authorized what you now do. And so you can look at this in different ways. It's, complex to bring it over into English and make it good idiomatic English, but it does not require the interpretation that some people want to give it, which is that the apostles are merely passive and just declaring something God already did in the past. If that was the meaning, or that God has already done, if that were the meaning, you would expect this to be phrased differently, perhaps something like, whatever you bind, God will already have bound, or something like that. And that's not what we have here. So it's because of the use of the future tense, which is rare, the future perfect tense, which is rare in the New Testament, it is tricky to interpret, but the standard English translations that you find in most Bibles are reasonable ways of translating it, and they should not be pressed into this unnatural, weirdly passive thing that it would imply on the part of the disciples. I mean, if they're merely announcing something God has already done, why would you say it this way?
Yeah. Right. Right. That's right. It strikes you as an actual power.
And why would Jesus want to assure them about the discipline of the church if they're just announcing something God's already done?
Yeah. All right, Casey, thank you very, very much for that call. Hope that was helpful to you. Let's go to Austin in Odessa, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Austin, I know you've been waiting a while. Thank you for your call. Your question for Jimmy, please.
Hey, thank you, Cy and Jimmy. I appreciate what you do on the show.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question. I was trying to figure this out. When we are asleep and we are not dreaming, are our souls, so to speak, asleep?
Interesting question. I would say yeah, because our souls are the substantial form of the human body. They're keeping us alive, and they're also closely integrated with our mental phenomena. And so if we are not experiencing conscious mental phenomena at the moment and thus are described as being asleep, then that seems to pertain to our souls as well. They're also asleep. They're still there. They're still doing their job, keeping our bodies functioning, and presumably integrated with the subconscious mental activity that's occurring in our brains even between dreams. But if our brain could be described as being asleep, I would say the soul that is animating the brain can be described as being asleep as well.
What do you think, Austin?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I would find it hard to say that our souls, just to add a little bit to that, I would find it hard to say that when we're asleep, our souls are awake. That doesn't seem to make sense if they're not, if we're not having mental phenomena, conscious mental phenomena at the time.
That would make us like two people or something.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I would find it hard to say that our souls are neither awake nor asleep, because they are so closely connected with conscious mental phenomena.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating question. Austin, thank you very, very much. I think we can do this. Let's go to Bob in Rhode Island, listening on 1060 AM. Bob, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Good evening. Thanks. That's very interesting this evening. I'm a recent convert to the Catholic faith from the Orthodox Church, and I questioned something that an apologist has described, that the Catholic Church is the only one true church that was founded by Jesus Christ on the night of the Last Supper with a priesthood initiation as well. And why would the Orthodox Church not be the same? John Paul II said the two churches are like two lungs in the same body.
Right.
And
we've got only a little bit of time, and I want to give you the best answer I can. So I don't know what apologist you were listening to that said that. You will commonly find apologists say that, and it's a kind of shorthand, assuming they understand it correctly. It's a kind of shorthand for what the church would actually say in a more subtle way. Now you have to think about, what does the word church mean? It can mean several different things. On the one hand, it can mean a local congregation, like the Church of St. Mary's of 40th Street. It can also mean the local diocese, the church that's united under the bishop. And then it can mean a worldwide communion, or a larger communion of many dioceses, like the Anglican Church or the Orthodox Church or the Catholic Church. In terms of the relevant sense here is the top one, and the worldwide church. And from what the Catholic Church would say, from a Catholic perspective, is that the church that Jesus Christ founded is present in the Catholic Church, and only the Catholic Church has all of the elements he wanted his church to have. It has, in particular, what distinguishes it from the Orthodox churches is it has the Pope. It has the Petrine ministry that he wanted his church to have. And so even though, according to the way the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith expresses it, Christ Church is also active in other bodies, including Orthodox bodies, it doesn't have all of what Christ wants his church to have. It doesn't. The Orthodox bodies, because they're not in communion with the successor of St. Peter, they don't have that Petrine ministry that Christ wanted. And so even though they have huge amounts of what Christ wanted his church to have, they don't have absolutely everything. So the way that Vatican II and the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith put it is that Christ Church is operative in the Orthodox communion, but it doesn't have absolutely everything he wants. And so a shorthand way of saying the Catholic Church is the only one that has everything is saying it's the only true church. But that's not as subtle or sophisticated as the way the church puts it formally. That's just kind of a popular shorthand that apologists will sometimes use.
Bob, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very, very much. I hope that was helpful. Can I say something, Jimmy?
Sure.
I meant to say this earlier
you're
in the show.
capable of saying many things.
Alyssa Milano is not the new chastity speaker for Catholic Answers.
Definitely not.
Because some people have seen that there's a joke article that way on the internet.
Yeah.
And I'm all for the jokes. I love it.
I like jokes too, but that one, it's causing confusion, and the guy who wrote it should take it down.
Oh, okay. Fair enough, because I know it has
and I
actually
know who
caused...
wrote it.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Well, even some people in this building were confused by it. Like, we're working with Alyssa Milano now. It's
no,
because
we're not.
she said some things about refraining from intercourse for political reasons, and that seems to have a chastity connection, and it's all a joke. She's welcome to become Catholic, and we'd be happy to have her, but
She's got a little ways to go before she'd be ready for the Speakers Bureau.
But she's not ready for the Catholic Answers Speakers Bureau. More Open Forum with Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Just like the saints of the Counter-Reformation, our own souls are in constant need of reform, of reconversion to God and His will for us. We struggle with sin. We become distracted in prayer. We find it hard to be loving and easy to be selfish. In Reform Yourself, Sean McAfee shows you how these magnificent saints can be guides to your own personal transformation. We all need to reform our souls. Let the saints who reformed the church show you how. Order your copy of Reform Yourself today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
God helps those who help themselves. Preach the gospel always. When necessary, use words. Sayings like these are such a part of tradition that we assume they come from the Bible, the saints, or famous Christian writers. Even though nobody can seem to place their origin, by sheer repetition, they have acquired a halo of truth. In What the Saints Never Said, Trent Horn takes over 40 of these well-known but actual dubious sayings and attempts to track them to...
Can we talk to the internet now?
Oh, hi, Internet.
Hi, Internet. It's me and Jimmy. Jimmy
We're
Akin.
talking to you. And Psychelic. Let's have a big hand for him.
That was on your behalf, Internet.
Dextromegaly. Or actually, dextromegaly, because it'd have to be the right hand.
Wait.
A big hand.
Oh, the right hand is bigger than the left hand?
No.
Oh.
Not necessarily. It could be.
Oh, all right.
There are asymmetries in all of our bodies.
I have noticed that. As a matter of fact, if you cover my face like this, on one side I look really mean, and on one side I look really nice. It's like I'm a mean person and a nice person.
You have half-resting mean face.
I do. I'm half a Jekyll, half a Hyde, I think. So we have this technology.
Just don't get a two-headed coin and cross out one side and start flipping it to make moral decisions.
I know what that's a reference to. Batman's former friend, now nemesis, Two-Face.
Harvey Dent, yeah.
Harvey Dent, yep. We have this technology where we can talk to you through the internet, and Nick has it back there.
It's a series of tubes.
But it's a series of tubes and levers. There are also levers involved.
And monkeys pull the levers.
But we always forget to do it. And so we were like...
Well, it's not that not always, we haven't made the... this is a recent idea that we've had
that's true.
to start. So we're doing it ad experimentum.
That means...
To experiment with.
Yeah. All right.
So what are we going to say to the internet?
So I was thinking maybe we could say, hey, you know what? We'll probably do this again at the... before I answer that, did you know there are a certain person here who, when I say the top of the hour and the bottom of the hour, did not know what I'm talking about. And I forgot that this whole generation...
That's a standard English idiom.
Yeah, but they rarely see a clock.
Yeah, the top means the beginning of the hour, the bottom means the middle of the hour.
Yeah, right, because the hands are pointing up at the top of the hour, and then the minute hand is pointing down at the bottom of the hour. So anyways, we'll do this again at the bottom of the hour. Maybe you could give us a question, something that Jimmy could answer quickly.
Speaking of questions, I got a question here on Facebook from Don, who says he'd like my opinion on this, and he says, I would very much like to know if it is more acceptable to receive communion on the tongue. I've always had the priest put it in my hand, but if it's better on the tongue, I want to do what's best. The answer is the church does not have a teaching on this, and the church does not want people looking down their noses one way or another on this question. If you live in the United States or another territory where communion in the hand is approved, then it is entirely your right to receive on the hand. It is also entirely your right to receive on the tongue, and the church does not teach that one form or the other is superior. This is a matter of church discipline. People can have different opinions about what they prefer. Personally, I like receiving on the tongue, but that's just a personal opinion. I would not look down on anybody who has a different preference, and that's not what the church wants. So,
Bye, Internet. Well, we're not leaving.
Near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Open forum again this hour. Jimmy Akin again this hour, and lots of people already on the lines. I'll tell you what, there's one line open, though. If you're a Catholic, non-Catholic, or other, and you have a question about the Catholic faith, the Catholic Church, Catholic people, the Bible, the sacraments, a moral question, all of those are welcome. 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. And we had a little fun at the break. We talked to the people on the internet.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of a cool, fun thing to do.
Yeah, and they heard us. I mean, we can always talk to them, but they may not hear us.
That is correct. I have heard
it's
that...
like I can talk to you anytime I want, but
What?
if you're not in the room or on the phone with me, you won't hear me probably.
Have you ever heard the expression that it's perfectly fine to talk to yourself?
Yeah,
but
of course.
You're in trouble if you listen?
I haven't heard that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you this, Jimmy, before we go back to phones.
I've never thought that talking to yourself is a sign of mental illness is I mean, that's not of itself a sign of mental illness,
No.
period. There's nothing crazy about talking when you're alone.
No, and sometimes you see it in particularly intense people who it just seems like the internal dialogue or the internal conversation got intense, and so it came out. And
or they're doing it for fun or whatever, but we have an internal monologue going on all the time in our heads when we're conscious.
Yeah.
And so it's totally normal. Just saying it out loud may violate social customs or
Yeah.
may be a little odd
Right.
if someone walks in and you're talking to yourself, but there's nothing crazy about it.
No, it seems
Now,
like
screaming at a shopping cart, you know, when...
man, have you ever gotten that one with the wobbly wheel, though? Tell me you don't scream at it at that point. Yeah, that's right. And it used to be that if someone was speaking in a loud voice in public and no one else was around, you thought, well, that would suggest something's going on, like a delusion or a...
Yeah.
But now it's just they're on their phone. Ken in San Antonio, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. You are up first this hour. Your question for Jimmy.
How you doing? I'm a first-time caller.
Happy to have you, Ken.
Thank you. My question is, I was baptized. I'm a Christian, and I was baptized as a young boy in North Carolina at a Baptist church, Fellowship Free Will Baptist Church. And I read the Bible. I read the Bible nightly, and the comfort that the Bible gives me when I read it is like no other. It relaxes me. It takes away a lot of my worries and the daily routine. And I do believe in the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in heaven.
Awesome.
I've read all the
How can
Gospels,
we help?
And I'm just wondering, sometimes I question my faith because even though I'm a Christian, I still fear death.
Oh, well, you shouldn't question your faith on that basis. God built us so that we have a negative emotional reaction to death. That's something that he wanted to be part of our nature so that we would avoid death and seek to preserve our lives. So it's built into us, and it is entirely natural and healthy to have negative emotional associations with death and the dying process, and to want to avoid that, and that's what motivates us to avoid dying. In fact, we can see that in the Gospels, Jesus himself had this as part of his human nature. He was averse to death. He had death aversion. We see that in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he is intensely praying, and he says, Father, if it's your will, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but yours be done. And so he submits himself to God's will, but he confesses emotionally he is not looking forward to this. And so, so Jesus, as someone with a human nature, had the aversion to death and the dying process and the suffering that involves, that we all have, and that God wants us to have. So there may be individuals who, when they're dying, they're totally at peace and they're totally fearless. But if so, that's a special grace that they've been given by God that goes beyond just human nature to help them in that moment. For most people, though, they need that avoidance of death instinct to be functioning. And the name for that avoidance of death instinct that we have is fear. Fear is what motivates us to avoid things.
Does that give you any comfort?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, good.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Keep listening and call again.
Thank you.
All right. God bless you, brother. Let us go then to John in Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. John, your question for Jimmy.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call. My question is just something my family and I talk about a lot. We go to church in a conservative diocese, which is awesome. We only have altar boys. We only have Eucharistic ministers or acolytes that are males. And then you can go, 15 miles down the road to a different diocese that has totally different things. And I guess my question, the thing we always wonder is, as a one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, how can things be so different from diocese to diocese? It doesn't change the faith. It's just something we all wonder in my family, how things can be so different when we're so close to each other.
Okay, so the basic answer is God willed that there be diversity in his church. He willed that there be unity so that we'd all be one body sharing one faith, but he also willed that there would be diversity. And that's something that you can show any number of ways. But one way of showing it is by looking at what St. Paul has to say. If you read, for example, Romans 12, or even more significantly, 1 Corinthians 12 to 14, Paul talks about how we all have different spiritual gifts, and that's by God's design. He compares the church as the body of Christ to a human body that has many different body parts, and they're not all the same. They don't all perform the same function. And so he says, just like we have eyes and ears and feet and stuff on our bodies, so the members of Christ's body, the church, are all different from each other. And that's actually good. He says, if the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? And if the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? We need these different gifts or different abilities and different inclinations that people have. And it applies not only to the supernatural gifts that the Holy Spirit gives us, but it applies to other things like our native talents. Just look at people. We don't all look the same. We don't all have the same emotional temperament. That diversity that God has built into human nature actually is a strength. You know what would happen if we were all like clones of each other, if we were all genetically identical? Do you know what would happen, Psychelet?
I'm thinking mass death.
Mass death would happen because as soon as a single fatal virus came along that could kill a person with one set of genes, it would kill everybody because everybody would have the same set of genes. So actually, within a given community, having diversity, as long as it doesn't destroy or harm the community, having diversity is a strength. And that's true for the Christian community as well as society at large. And so God wanted people to be different. And he wanted there to be diversity within the one faith, including how it's practiced. And that's been the case ever since the first century. So you would have, right there in the first century, you'd have some Christians who spoke Aramaic, and you'd have other Christians who spoke Greek, and others who spoke Latin, and others who spoke Egyptian. And you'd have some Christians who were circumcised and some Christians who weren't. You'd have some Christians who were free and some Christians who were slaves. You'd have some Christians who practiced the liturgy according to one form, and you'd have other Christians who practiced it according to a different form because the liturgy hadn't been standardized yet. It was still developing. And so this diversity is something that's always been there, and the pastors of the church, i.e. the bishops and the Pope, have to use their judgment in discerning, okay, well, given the set of people in my diocese, those are the people I need to reach, those are the people I'm shepherd of. How do I best serve them? And what choices do I make in terms of, say, are we going to have altar boys or altar girls? What's going to facilitate people's tranquility with the faith and their union with Christ and his church more? The answer to that may not be the same everywhere. It may not be the same in your part of Nebraska as it would be, say, in Berkeley, California. If the bishop in Berkeley, California said, guess what, we're not going to have altar girls, just altar boys, that could alienate a bunch of people in Berkeley from the church, especially in the short run. And so these decisions need to be made by the prudent judgment of the pastors, but in terms of why is there a diversity of practice, it's because God wanted people to be different.
Oh, and thank you very, very much for that question, John. I do appreciate it. Let us go to, oh, you know what? We got to take a quick break. Sorry about that. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin right here on Catholic Answers Live right after this.
A skeptic once engaged me in conversation saying, "Yeah, I'm skeptical about everything." To which I replied, "Are you skeptical about that?" And I actually got a chuckle out of his girlfriend standing nearby. You see, the claim, "I doubt everything," refutes itself. If a skeptic doubts everything, well, then he must doubt the claim, "I doubt everything," which of course is the same as saying, "I doubt that I doubt everything." This is absurd. If a skeptic doubts his own assertion, "I doubt everything," well, then why even put it forward? Suppose my skeptic friend retorted, "No, I'm certain I doubt everything." Well, this wouldn't help him either because there would be one thing he doesn't doubt, namely the claim, "I doubt everything." No matter how a radical skeptic approaches his skepticism, whether he doubts it or affirms it, he ends in a self-contradiction. I'm Carlo Broussard with a ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
What makes me happy is listening to Catholic radio. I'm by myself a lot. Had a concussion as a child and I can't see very well, but I do work. I go to church and I'm an on-fire convert. And as a child, more or less, I've learned to have a good sense of humor whenever I can, and I'm very appreciative of everything I have, and especially Catholic radio.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
We got a huge, giant, magnificent Catholic Answers Conference coming up September 26th to 29th right here in beautiful sunny San Diego. It is about the best time of the year to be in San Diego is September. It's my personal favorite month. I hope you'll come and join us. The theme of the conference is the early church was the Catholic Church, and for about a month more we've got early bird pricing on it. So go ahead and get your tickets if you're thinking about coming. The full conference ticket includes the banquet dinner with our keynote speaker, Bishop Frank Caggiano from Bridgeport, Connecticut. Rod Bennett is going to be a speaker. Father David McConey is going to be a speaker. Monsignor Eugene Morris is going to be a speaker. Our own Jimmy Akin, Trent Horn, Carlo Broussard, and Tim Staples will be speakers. But I think the highlight that everyone is looking forward to, Jimmy, is
the square dancing.
Square dancing.
Yeah.
Did you have fun doing that last year?
Oh, yeah. I had a lot of fun. Looking forward to doing it. It was such a big hit, they said we need to do it again this year. So
okay.
Looking forward to calling some dances for folks.
And I noticed that not all of the music was like old-timey.
Oh, no.
You have some very contemporary music in there.
Yeah. Today, I mean, I called a lot of different kinds of dance, including others besides square dancing. But even in square dancing, in modern Western square dancing, you have all kinds of music that gets used. I mean, I have world beat things that I'll call dances to. For example, I have a piece by a Danish group singing in English pretending to be from Japan. that I call to, and it's like techno, Euro, Japan pop.
I don't
in
even know what to
English.
say sometimes, Jimmy. I don't even know what to say. Like, I'd be curious. I'm not going to ask you now on the air, but sometime I'd like to know where you even came across that piece of music.
Well,
Dane's,
I got it in collar school. It's by it's called the Rig-a-Dig-a-Ding Dong song. Oh well, no, there's two of them actually that I'm thinking of. One of them is the Rig-a-Dig-a-Ding Dong song by Passion Fruit, which was a European band, and then there's also one called Butterfly, which is the one by the Europeans pretending to be Japanese but singing in English.
And you'll be preparing so much for calling this square dance, you won't even be able to give your usual well-prepared, highly competent talk.
Oh, I can call dances in my sleep. In fact,
really?
I do.
Even when your soul is asleep, or only when you're...
I write choreography in my sleep, and then I wake
that
up
wild?
and write it down. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So, but you will be giving a talk.
Yes, I will.
And it'll be on...
The very first church fathers, the very earliest.
I'm really looking forward to this. Like Polycarp?
Even earlier.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta hear, because I know you wrote a book.
I mean, Polycarp, he's like 108 AD. There's earlier fathers than that.
Really? But I heard that Polycarp heard the Apostle John preach. Is that true?
It's possible.
Oh, okay. It's one of the possibilities. Because you wrote a book called The Fathers Know Best, Your Essential Guide to the Teachings of the Early Church. So who could be a church father earlier than...
Clement of Rome.
Oh.
And there are other early Christian writers, too, like Hermas.
Oh, yeah, who wrote The Shepherd.
The Shepherd, yeah.
Okay.
It's such a fun book, The Shepherd. It's just, for people who don't know, it's a first century private revelation. Hermas is this guy. He's an ex-slave. He's gotten married and has children. He's become a prosperous businessman, and he starts having visions of the church as a beautiful woman. And then an angel, the angel of repentance, comes to live with him, and shows him these visions. And it's really just a fun book. Hermas is such an innocent guy.
You know, I until you told me that, actually, I hadn't read The Shepherd of Hermas, because you had recommended it as a really fun read, and it really is. It's like it's a story. It's a really.
Yeah. I like in the vision where he's walking down the road and he starts having a vision. This is out in the countryside outside of Rome.
Yeah.
And he's walking down the road. He starts having a vision, and this giant monster that's multicolored that symbolizes persecution starts just cascading down the road toward him, and he hears a voice saying, like, Hermas, remember your faith. And as soon as he remembers his faith, the monster like shuts up and gets subservient.
Yeah.
And it's like how Christians triumph over persecution.
It's beautiful. All right, so we're going to hear about the earliest church fathers from you. All right, and that's going to be at our conference called The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, coming up this September 26th through 29th at the beautiful Hyatt Regency La Jolla right here in sunny San Diego. Just go to CatholicAnswersConference.com, CatholicAnswersConference.com, and be a part of it. We're expecting about you and about 1,000 other people. So that's what we're looking forward to, and it's a lot of fun. I want to say, before we go to our next caller, hello to Javier in Shanghai, because I know Javier listens all the time in Shanghai.
Cool.
And I always forget to say hi to him. I don't even know if we have other listeners I think in Chinese, they don't say Shanghai. They say Shanghai, I think. But anyways.
I don't know. I haven't taken enough Mandarin. I've taken a little bit, because it's been a long time.
I watched a Chinese movie last night called
which one?
The Wandering Earth. Have you seen it yet? The Wandering Earth?
No.
It's a Chinese science fiction movie.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah. And
the first PG movie I ever saw was a Chinese science fiction movie.
What was that?
Inframan.
Oh, I've never even heard of that one.
Yeah, it's kind of like a think 1970s Hong Kong really silly version of Iron Man.
Oh, that's
sense.
Okay.
He battles the forces, all these monsters that are being sent by Princess Dragon Mom.
Oh man, I got to see that. The Wandering Earth is a little more contemporary. Okay, back to the phones.
The Earth does wander.
Oh,
it even precesses.
Yeah, but in this one, it really wanders. Like it heads out towards Jupiter.
Oh, and, that's not good.
No, it's not. Until they figure out how to.
It's like that episode of The Twilight Zone. Where
I don't want to give it away. Where the
woman she's on Earth, and it's like the Earth is falling towards the sun, and it's all like burning up, and it's so hot, and she's just sweating like crazy. And then at the end of the episode, the twist is she's actually asleep. She's got a fever, and the Earth is actually moving away from the sun, and it's getting colder.
And that's pretty much exactly how a Twilight Zone is supposed to end. give us that little twist right there at the end. Eric in Hamilton, New Jersey, you are up next with Jimmy Akin. Your question, Eric.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
We can, Eric.
Yeah, just so folks know, you don't need to ask if we can hear you. If we can't, we'll turn you up.
Okay. Well, my phone's acting a little funny. I have to yell into it to be heard. So.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, yeah, my question was about the priesthood. If a priest is like defrocked or kicked out of the church, does he still have the ability to perform the sacraments?
Okay. Well.
Okay. Go ahead.
What's the second question?
Question about the Celtic Catholic Church and its relationship to the Roman Catholic Church.
Okay. So in regard to the first question, defrocked is a kind of a casual, informal slang term that gets used for when a priest has his is suspended from being able to perform the sacraments. And so it's not the technical term that's used in canon law, but it's the one you hear in the press. It does not mean being kicked out of the church. The church doesn't kick people out. It may apply various penalties to them if they've done something really wrong, but it never expels them from the church altogether. Not even excommunication does that. Excommunication restricts a person's ability to do certain things in the church, but it doesn't make them a non-Catholic. The church is not in the business of kicking people out and pushing them away from the church in that way. It will, though, discipline them when they do something wrong and need to be corrected. Whether it's because he's done something wrong or simply because he's decided the priesthood isn't for him, if a priest leaves the clerical state, either as a punishment, he could be expelled from the clerical state, or he could just request it. He's not allowed to perform the sacraments anymore, with one exception. If there's someone who's dying, he can hear that person's confession, because the church wants to make confession available to every single dying person so that they can have the opportunity of being reconciled with God even at the moment of death. And so if he's there and someone is dying and that person wants him to hear their confession, he can hear their confession, but it's only in that kind of emergency circumstance that he can do that. Otherwise, he cannot perform the sacraments. In terms of the other question about the Celtic Catholic Church, this is a body that claims obviously to be both Celtic and Catholic. It's actually based here in the United States, and it claims to have apostolic succession from a 17th century Archbishop of Canterbury, who was an archbishop in the Anglican Church. So that right there is a problem for them having valid holy orders. But it's not even clear that they have such succession, because there is apparently no evidence of them existing before the 1960s. And so they're a recent body that is claiming to have this succession, but even if they had it, it wouldn't be valid from a Catholic point of view.
Thank you very, very much for that call and for that question, Eric. We appreciate it. Up next is Willie in Columbia, South Carolina, listening on St. Joseph Radio. Willie, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Yes. I want to know, I remember in the Bible it says that when Jesus told his disciples to go out and proclaim the gospel to the whole world. Hello?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Willie.
You're on the air. What's the question?
Romans 11, Paul is talking about inclusiveness, bringing the Gentiles into the kingdom, God's kingdom, and making the Jews jealous. I don't understand that.
Okay. So jealous is not necessarily the best English way to communicate what's going on, but it actually does a pretty good job. The idea is that, and St. Paul talks about this elsewhere. He talks about how he makes much of his ministry to the Gentiles in order to win over some Jews. And the idea, when he says makes much of, he means he talks a lot about it. And so he goes out, he converts Gentiles. Then when he's among Jews, he talks about how much the Gentiles are responding to God's grace and to God's gospel. And the reason he does that is because he wants the Jews to get on fire for God too, and to take their heritage seriously and their faith seriously, and to accept Jesus as the Messiah. And he uses what's happening with the Gentiles as a way of trying to win over Jews. And that's essentially what he's talking about in Romans 11. He says that because the Gentiles are coming into God's church, because they're responding to the gospel and becoming believers in Jesus, that has the potential to make Jews jealous of the same thing, to want the same thing. And so that's what he's hoping will happen, is that the fact that Gentiles are becoming Christians will help Jews to also want to become Christians and to accept Jesus as their Messiah. Because after all, Jesus is their Messiah. He himself was a Jew.
Now, Willie, does that address what you wanted to get at?
That's good, because anyway, a lot of the Jews, there are certain Jews still don't believe Jesus is the Messiah, right?
That's correct. There are Jews who do believe that Jesus is the Messiah, but there are also Jews who, unfortunately, don't yet believe that Jesus is the Messiah. But hopefully one day.
Thanks so much, Willie. I'm concerned about Catholics who don't believe Jesus is the Messiah. I think we'd
have to be pretty uneducated Catholics not to believe that.
Well, I just think we have a tendency towards syncretism, I guess, a little bit of, all these religious leaders are the same. You know, that kind of...
Well, that's indifferentism.
Indifferentism. Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
But they might still think he's the Messiah, but who cares?
Yeah, who cares? Right, who cares about the Messiah? Okay, Willie, thanks again for that call. It is open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and we will be right back with more of your calls for Jimmy on Catholic Answers Live. Hello again, Internet. It's me, Cy Kellett, here with Jimmy Akin, and we're just having fun with this new technology. Jimmy, here's a question for you.
Not that new.
No, that's right. But we needed to get something soldered on the board to be able to use it.
Oh.
So that's what, for a long time, we didn't do it.
Oh.
Jimmy, a very serious question from Ed
Okay.
on the Internet. He says, can you be a contestant on Jeopardy?
If I pass the tests that they apply to people on Jeopardy, then sure.
I think you'd be a terror on Jeopardy. Jeopardy.
It depends. It depends entirely on the categories that they have on any given day. I enjoy watching Jeopardy. I haven't seen it in a long time, although I did recently watch some YouTube videos about Jeopardy. And I like the show a lot. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I will, like everybody else, I'll play along at home. And how well I do depends entirely on the categories they have on a given day.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if it's celebrities, I know nothing. If it's sports, I know nothing.
Really? You don't know anything about Cardi B if she comes
Who?
up? My point exactly. Yeah, I guess I can see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is pretty...
Now, if it's subatomic particles for 200, okay, I got a shot.
Really?
But
All right. Jimmy, I'm a subatomic particle. I start with the letter Q.
I'm guessing, what is a quark, Alex?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess in that case, the quark was talking to you. It would be who is a quark.
Yeah.
But I forgot how to do
I am a particle. Particle Man.
From
They Might Be Giants.
That's a
Particle
song?
Particle Man does whatever a particle can.
Yeah, they might. Yeah. Nick remember. Oh.
Ooh, They Might Be Giants. Ooh,
5
seconds.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Our content provided by the callers. You're welcome to ask any question you've got about the Catholic faith, about Catholic people, or about religion or ethics or philosophy more generally.
Weird stuff.
Weird stuff. Oh, well, I always wait till long to get to this, so I'm going to say this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy is also the podcaster behind the podcast called Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
One of the two with my co-host Don Bettinelli.
Right. And I forgot on Friday to listen to the Fatima
Oh yeah,
one. Or was that Monday that it dropped?
No, it was
Friday.
Every Friday a new episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World comes out, and last Friday was Fatima.
Yeah,
So there's a new one tomorrow.
Do you want to give us any clue about what's coming out this
tell
Friday?
you exactly what it is.
Oh, that's tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's the secret Pentagon UFO study project known as ATIP, which has released to the public gun camera footage of unidentified aerial things. They do not know what they are, and that outperform anything we've got.
This brings up a question I've always wanted to ask you, and this is an actual Catholic Answers question, so I'm inserting myself into the queue now to ask you an open forum question. There was a movie years ago, it was a joke movie, it was a comedy movie about an alien who came to the Earth.
Okay.
And
There's been a number of those.
The Christians in the movie were very afraid of the alien, and it upset them. And the alien said, that's because my existence overturns a belief in an Abrahamic God. And I thought,
what a lame line of dialogue.
Okay, so I wondered about that. Like, there's nothing about an alien coming to Earth which would overturn the Bible or anything.
No.
Okay, I just wanted to run that by you.
No, it's also just a piece of wooden dialogue, if that's the way they said it.
It was it was a paraphrase.
I mean, like, how would the alien even know the term Abrahamic God?
Oh, he was very savvy, and he had been on Earth for like 30 years.
Oh,
so
well, he might have learned it in that time. But.
Yeah, or Abrahamic religion or something. He said it overturns.
No, it has nothing to do. If God, I mean, okay, so God makes Abraham. God appears to Abraham. How does that stop God from also making aliens somewhere else?
Right, right. I'm not a believer in aliens
You're
myself.
not?
No, except for angels.
Okay,
but I'm waiting for the. No, I don't know. I actually don't know why.
So-
I think
so
it's just
do
a
you-
contrary position.
so
I
do
think
you-
I take it just to be contrarian, frankly.
Okay, so do you think there are no intelligent aliens anywhere, or just they haven't come here?
Oh, I don't think there's any intelligent aliens.
Okay, do you?
I
Think
do think
there
there's
are
probably life.
unintelligent aliens, like
Yeah.
microbes or something.
Yeah,
somewhere.
that kind of
Okay.
thing. I do think that seems likely.
Uh-huh.
And I got no reason for that except maybe just I like being a contrarian.
Okay.
Because it seems like everybody goes nowadays, well, there's so many planets and so many stars, there has to be life. And I feel like that's actually not an argument. That's just an assertion. And not just life, but intelligent life.
Uh-huh.
And so then I get all fussy and go the other direction. But I have nothing more to support my view, you know.
Okay. Well, there are arguments that the kind of environment you need to have a place like Earth is very rare. It's
Yeah.
called the rare Earth hypothesis.
Right.
And there are some people who will argue like we're the only intelligent life in the galaxy.
No.
Others will say, no, there's got to be more. But, there are people who argue that. And then there will be others who argue we're the only intelligent life in the universe.
That's more my view.
But that's usually if it's supported by argument, it's usually for more theological reasons than scientific reasons.
Yeah. But mine is for no reason.
Okay.
It's just my...
Just your inclination.
Yeah, my inclination is in that direction, yes. Kyle, watching on YouTube Live. I'm sorry, Kyle. I was just having trouble figuring out which button to push. You're up next, Kyle. Go ahead. Your question.
Hi,
Hi,
my
Kyle.
question is regarding a parish's rights, I guess.
Okay.
Back in December, our priest... Say again?
Okay.
Hold on. Yep. Our priest was put on a leave of absence for... it was very vague accusations that we were told about. It was just that he broke the code of conduct with minors and that it wasn't sexual in nature. That's all that was given to us. And then he's been on leave of absence since then. We've had a visiting priest from the diocese, and he gives us very minimal information. Really, all he says is he's doing well, if you ask him. And the parish is getting to a point where we're losing members now. Our finances have started to fall off a little bit because there's some disgruntled people who have stopped giving to the offertory, things of that nature. And
how can I help? What's your question for me?
Under canon law, when there's an investigation going on for the priest, does the parish have any rights, and should they be given any sort of transparency with the...
Okay.
That's very clear. Thank
you. In terms of does the parish have rights? Well, the people who go to the parish have rights under Catholic moral theology to, they have a right in the first place to be protected and from all kinds of different things, including non-sexual things, and so it's removing a priest from a parish while an investigation is going on is intended to do just that, to protect people who in the parish who have rights to be protected. So that of itself it's a prudential application of the underlying moral principles that are in play in this situation. But the people in the parish aren't the only ones who have rights. The priest also has rights, including, especially if he's innocent, a right to his good name. And legally, he also has a presumption of innocence. And so just because an accusation gets made, that may mean you need to take to investigate the situation, but it doesn't mean you automatically condemn someone. It's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So if you wouldn't want all of the details of an accusation against you told to everybody you know and work with while it's still being investigated and is still unproven, then you shouldn't expect all of the details of an accusation that's been made against someone else to be told to everyone while an investigation is still underway and they're still unproven. So I would say, it's understandable that people would want more information than they have. But how much information they should be given is going to be a matter of prudence. The priest, especially if he turns out to be innocent, he needs to not have his reputation destroyed by having all kinds of, accusations, whether of a sexual nature or a non-sexual nature, as in this case, being told to everybody he knows and works with. He may want a certain amount of information to be shared, just so people don't leap to the worst possible conclusion. I can imagine a priest saying, being told, okay, we're going to have to take you out of the parish while we do this investigation. And he knows it's not a sexual allegation, but he knows if he's just taken out and people learn there's an investigation, that they're going to think it's about sex.
Yeah.
And so I could easily imagine a priest saying, please tell them this is not about sex.
Yeah.
Let them know that much.
Right. But
still not wanting every single detail of the accusation to be shared with everyone while it's still unproven. So it's a tough situation when investigations like this have to happen, and there has to be a prudential balancing of the needs of people to know things, needs as opposed to wants.
Yes. Right.
And the needs of the person who's been accused to due process and to his reputation, especially if he's innocent, turns out to be innocent.
And you do, Kyle, thanks very much for the call. I hope that was helpful to you. I mean, I've been in a situation where a school teacher in a school was taken, and there is a kind of drama and upset that goes around it, but you have to be patient and wait. I mean, it happens with police officers are suspended, and it's just a fact. A lot of times, until everything's done, there's just not much to share.
Yeah.
All right, Kyle. Thank you. I hope that was helpful. Let us go to Dan in Indianapolis. Hi, Dan. Are you there with us?
Hello.
Your question for Jimmy, Dan.
Yes, I have a question regarding Luke chapter 17, verses 34 and 35, where Christ, in speaking about the end times, says, I tell you, in that night there will be two men in one bed. One will be taken and the other left. There will be two women grinding together. One will be taken and the other left. So I have friends that are very much pro-LGBT, and they repeatedly cite this verse to me as being justification for believing that Christ actually is perfectly acceptable towards homosexual conduct because of the verb grinding referring actually...
Oh, no.
All right, well... Yeah, no, I see where you're going, but
okay,
that's an interesting exegesis.
Yeah,
let me put it that way.
So let's take a look at both parts of this. The first one, it doesn't in Greek actually say two men. It says two. There will be two in one bed. One will be taken and the other left. Now, in Greek, the word for two in this case is in the masculine, but it doesn't mean two men, because masculine is the default gender you use when you're talking about groups of people. So just like in English, if I am talking historically, now today people have different sensibilities in some cases, but historically, if I say something like all men have the right to be treated fairly, well, I'm including women in that.
Yes,
I don't mean just persons of the male gender.
Right.
And the same thing is true in Greek. When you see and it's also true in Spanish and other languages, like if you talk about mis padres, well, okay, that's masculine, but it means my parents.
Yeah.
Even though it literally would be my father's.
Right.
It's one of your fathers, in this case, is your mother. It's just the masculine is used as a default gender whenever you have two. So when Jesus says there will be two people in one bed, he means there will be a couple. He could mean that it's a man and a woman. It's a husband and wife.
Mm-hmm.
That's the normal way you'd say it. You'd say there will be two in one bed, one will be taken and the other left, and he means a male and female couple. On the other hand, sometimes people of the same gender do sleep in the same bed, and sex is not involved at all. This is something that is mentioned in the book of Proverbs about how if you got, a couple guys out in the country, it's cold at night, they may lie down under the same blanket so they can keep warm together. This happens, all the time without sex being involved. Our culture is a little different, but historically there's just not a presumption that if you have two people in the same bed of the same gender that they're going to be having sex. Growing up, you look back at even earlier in the previous century, you'll see the Three Stooges in bed together.
Yeah.
You'll see all kinds of groups of people of the same gender, the Marx Brothers in bed together.
Right.
You'll see all kinds of things like that.
Even in the 19th century, if you were traveling and you stayed at an inn, you very often were in the same bed with another man, for example, or another woman.
You're not even
nothing
related
was
to.
thought of it. You you got a bed.
Right.
Go to bed.
So there's an imposing of ideas from our culture inappropriately into a text about another culture.
Yeah.
Also, the grinding thing, it says the two women will be grinding grain together. And if you think that's any kind of a sexual reference, you really do not understand how people got food in the ancient world, because you had to grind grain in order to make bread, and bread was the key component of everybody's diet in this era, so much so that the Greek word for bread, arton, also just means food. Because bread was the overwhelming kind of food people ate. And it was a typical task of women to grind the grain that they would then use to make the bread. And so Jesus is just talking about two women grinding grain together when this disaster happens.
Dan, we will have to leave it there because we do have to take our last break of the hour. We'll be right back with more questions for Jimmy Akin. It is open forum, and the lines are full, and we will try to get to as many as we can before the top of the hour. Right back after this.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their faith and values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
New on EWTN Radio, The Church Alive.
This is St. Monica, who I think is one of those great role models for so many mothers today.
My mother passed on to eternal life 8 years ago on the Feast of St. Monica. And you know, what a powerful example for me, because I know she prayed me back to the church.
The Church Alive with Brian Patrick, Dr. Matthew Bunson, and Father Thomas Petra. Saturday at 7 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Open forum, Jimmy Akin, Catholic Answers Live. We go now to Ezra in Fort Worth, Texas. Ezra, you there with us?
Yes, I am.
Your question, Ezra, for Jimmy.
My question is, I know everyone can become a saint, and I know some angels are saints, but it seems to me like wouldn't every angel be a saint? Why only some of them?
Well, so there's sort of two aspects to this question. The first one is some angels are not saints because they rebelled against God and became demons. So those angels are not saints because they're not holy. All of the other angels, all of the angels who did not rebel and who stayed loyal to God, all of them are saints. So they're absolutely, all of them are saints. That's why we have All Saints Day on the calendar to honor them, because all of the good angels are also saints. And they're included among the all saints that include the human saints. In terms of why do we only refer to certain angels who are saints as like Saint Michael and Saint Gabriel? It's because they're the ones whose names we know. We don't know the names of very many angels in the Bible. Only like 3 are named in the books that Catholics honor as Scripture, and so but we know there are millions and millions and millions of angels, and we just don't know most of their names. And so we don't talk about, Saint Bocephus or whoever the angel, because we don't know if there is a Saint Bocephus the angel.
Well, now there is, now that you've said it.
Well,
you just started something.
No, that's not how it works.
Okay.
And also, an angel does not get his wings when bells ring. That's Hollywood stuff.
Ezra, how's that? Does that satisfy your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the call, Ezra. Appreciate it. Let's go to Ken in Champaign, Illinois, listening on 95.7 FM. Ken, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call. I have an unusual question.
Okay.
And I have a dentist appointment coming up to pull a tooth. They've discovered there's bone loss underneath it, and to repair that, they intend to use this bone matrix that is derived from human cadavers. And I just didn't know if there's any problems involved with that sort of use of using that.
Not in principle. It's not intrinsically wrong to to have a medical procedure where something from someone else's body is put into yours. I mean, that's what a blood transfusion is. You take, blood from someone else's body and you put it in yours, and it helps you live or recover from an injury or whatever it may be. The same thing is true. Taking a bone matrix from a cadaver and putting it in your body is the same as a blood transfusion or an organ transplant, as long as the person who donated the bone did so willingly. And I would assume that they did, because it would be illegal to take someone's bone from their body after they died if they didn't donate it, or if their relative who speaks for them didn't give permission for it. Then I would assume that whoever donated this bone, and it might even be more than one person, gave consent, in which case it puts it in the same category as any other kind of organ transplant or blood transfusion. If memory serves, it's only I think your own body will eventually replace the bone over the course of time. Just like if you get a blood transfusion, your body will eventually replace that blood with your own. So it may not even remain permanently. You'd have to check with your dentist on that. But there's no intrinsic moral problem here.
Okay. Feel all right now?
Well, my dentist explained that it does replace itself eventually, so you're right on that.
All right. Well, you are okay, Ken, and God bless you as you undergo that surgery.
Hope they get you back to good dental health.
Up next, Josh in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, listening on the Ave Maria radio app. Josh, your question for Jimmy Akin. Josh? No. I mean, hey, hang on, Josh. If you're talking, I could have. It's possible. Sometimes I do push the wrong button at the end of the.
Also,
no, that was the right button.
It's important for people to listen to their phones, not their radios, when they're on hold, because there's a time delay. You won't hear us if you're listening to your radio when we put you on the air.
I bet you're there, Josh. Are you there now?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome.
Your question for Jimmy.
Yeah, it's from my son David. He's 9. He goes to a Catholic school, and there's an older boy there who's Lutheran.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't believe in purgatory, obviously. The Lutheran doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So my son asked, what do Lutherans teach about purgatory?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question.
Okay, so what do Lutherans teach about purgatory?
Luther himself did not like the idea of purgatory, and so he and the vast majority of Lutherans don't really use this concept in their theology. And they'll even say negative things about it. They'll say they don't believe in purgatory and so forth. But if you sit down with them and you say, well, wait a minute, are you perfectly holy when you die? Most of them will say, well, no, probably not. And then if you say, well, will you be perfectly holy when you're in heaven? They'll say, oh, yeah, definitely. We're not going to be sinning in heaven. So you can then make the point, well, if you're not perfectly holy when you die, but you will be perfectly holy when you're in heaven, then you must have some kind of purification between death and heaven that makes you perfectly holy. Now, it may not take a lot of time. It may happen just in an instant, in the twinkling of an eye, to use a phrase from the Bible. It may not take place in any special location. But there does seem to have to be some kind of purification that happens between death and heaven if you're still prone to sin in this life and you're not prone to sin in heaven. And can we agree on that? And if they think about it, Lutherans will typically say, yeah, we can agree on that. And then you can say, well, that's what we call purgatory as Catholics. That's what it is. It's the final stage of our purification where God makes us perfectly holy and ready to be with him in heaven. We don't claim that it takes any amount of time in particular. It could be instantaneous. We don't claim that it takes place in any particular location in the afterlife. It may not. We're not really told. But we do know that there is some kind of final stage to our purification that God does to us by the grace of Jesus Christ. And that's what we call purgatory. So even though Lutherans don't use the name in their theology, they can typically be, talked with and dialogued with in a way that they'll understand that, oh, this concept actually makes sense, even though our theological tradition doesn't use the name for it that Catholics use.
Josh, I hope it's helpful. I'm going to leave it there because, as I said, I want to get as many people in before we have to go. Let's go to Therese. I don't have a location for you, Therese, but are you there with us, Therese?
Yes, I am.
Pretty quickly, your question for Jimmy.
So I belong to a parish that has been a vital parish. Mm-hmm. This goes into a question that was asked several callers back about the differences in parishes.
Okay. Just so you know, we're getting really close to the end. What's your question?
And it's always been known for its, it was just a fabulous parish. And we have since, I've seen many parish pastors come and go, and the pastor or the parish has always been strong.
Okay, Therese,
we got to have a question.
We got to have
Therese.
a question.
Well, the new pastor has changed everything.
Okay.
He's changed the music. He's changed.
Okay, got it. He's changed a bunch of stuff. What's the problem?
Is your question, what can you do about that, or am I in the ballpark, Therese?
I know are leaving the parish while all of the young people are flooding in. And my question is, I understand we need to get the younger people in. What is a person like me to do?
Okay. Well, I would say a number of things, and unfortunately, we didn't have more time to explore all the dimensions of the question. But based on the information we were able to get on the table, I would say that that one wants to pray about the situation. One wants to, in one's own heart, be open to different things. One wants to recognize that the church does need to bring in young people in the future. It can't cater exclusively to one group, but that also means that it needs to find a balance because it can't cater exclusively to young people either. It needs to care for people who are at a different stage of life. And so I would say, try to be open, try to be reasonable, try to discuss it with, you mentioned people are leaving, and if they're going to another parish, that's not necessarily a problem. If they're just going to one that's more to their liking, that's okay. You can go, you can fulfill your Sunday obligation at any Catholic parish. So, but if people are being alienated from the church where they're not going to another parish, talk to them. Don't just pray for them, but also talk to them and say, hey, I understand, and my preferences aren't for this either, but we do need to take account. We need to find a balance here. If you think that there are other tweaks that the pastor could make, like maybe put a few things back the way they were to help win over some long-timers, talk to the pastor about it. Just be reasonable and respectful. You may need to talk to the bishop if there's a big problem, but just try to be prudent and reasonable and charitable, and don't get alarmed by every single change, but try to find a balance.
Thanks very much, Therese, for that question. I hope that was helpful. Jimmy Akin, thank you for a couple great hours.
My pleasure, anytime.
You can find Jimmy at Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. That's his podcast. All of his books are at shop.catholic.com. The latest one is Teaching with Authority. And tomorrow, hey, join us. We got 2 hours with Trent Horn tomorrow. But don't worry, it's going to be good anyways. Oh, wait, that didn't come out right.
Ooh.
My bad. Oh, excuse me. Wait, oh.